Good afternoon, and welcome to the 2022 Noonday Program, a collaborative storytelling effort between the Triangle Martin Luther King Jr. Committee and the United Way of the Greater Triangle. I have the distinct pleasure of serving both organizations, and I can assure you that you are in for a treat today. At the United Way of the Greater Triangle, our mission is to eradicate poverty and increase social mobility through the power of partnerships. We've primarily done this work by supporting traditional nonprofit organizations across our four-county footprint: Orange, Durham, Wake, and Johnston counties. We'll continue to do this work, but we'll also continue to look for the best solutions to our community's most deep-rooted social issues. Our search for the right solutions has led us to develop a strategy we're calling Neighborhood Impact, a responsibility to empower local leaders and local communities, those closest to the issues we are committed to addressing, to define and decide what's right and wrong, the space to dream, and the resources to carry out their ideas. United Way of the Greater Triangle is committed to creating a philanthropic structure where these leaders and neighborhoods have access to the resources to further their work. We are here today to give you a glimpse into what neighborhood impact looks like in practice. Today, you will hear from 3 members of a 9-person local leader cohort. Since early 2021, these leaders have met to share their passions, refine their ideas, and build a network of support, a beloved community, through their solutions. In partnership with Dr. Terrence Ruth, these leaders have felt supported in ways that accelerate their impacts. At the end of this cohort meeting, members will receive $12,000 in seed investment, in addition to leadership development opportunities that allow them to show up their best and brightest selves in support of their community. But before we talk to this group, we will hear a few words from our partner and leader, Dr. Terrence Ruth.
I am a strong believer in MLK's belief that love is not the absence of power. Actually, love at its core should have a concept or vision of power. We'd be in error keeping the belief that love is ceding power. After all, Dr. King described love without power as sentimental and anemic. We must understand the inverse, that power without love is, as King said, evil and corrosive. So how do we find the best power? Power at its best is love implementing the demands of justice. And justice at its best is the power to correct everything that stands against love. These are the pillars of a beloved community. I am Terrence Ruth, a professor at NC State, former executive director of the NAACP State Conference, and a strong believer that love is not the absence of power. A belief taught, shared by the man who we honor and remember today and always, Dr. Martin Luther King. By centering community leaders that advocate for justice in the ideation and the design and implementation of solutions to systemic racial social ills, we can honor MLK, including the leaders of underinvested communities. Early and key decisions is the only way we will do this well. Their love for their community shapes the power of investment. I am grateful that United Way and I have partnered to chart a new territory, using the power residing in traditional philanthropy. Our metric is co-designed with those on the front lines of the fight for justice. Our goal is to exercise power at its best, which is love implementing the demands of justice. And we want justice at its best, which is power correcting everything that stands against love. Our work rests on a human-centered design framework. It recommends that we center the individuals directly impacted by the problem because they are ideally best positioned to be in close proximity to the solution. The experts rest outside of traditional philanthropy hierarchy and rest in the hands, the feet, the minds, and the stories of the impacted members in overlooked communities. We must not forget that MLK rose from the community. He was a leader that responded to the cause of community. He was a leader that was a student of the community. And if we are to truly honor him, then we must become students of the community ourselves. More importantly, we must humble ourselves and become students of those that live in underfunded communities. It's from these same communities that King envisioned his beloved community. It is from these same underinvested communities that King rested his hope for America. Like King, we should be students that center love and justice. We should seek to do justice, love powerfully, and walk humbly. Thank you for valuing the best type of power, one that exercises love for the purposes of establishing justice. It's an honor to learn about justice, love, and the beautiful lives of this year's cohort. Thank you for sharing this with me. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm so grateful for Professor Ruth for his inspiring and motivating speech. My name is Angel Brown, and I'm the manager of Neighborhood Impact at United Way. As Nick Allen mentioned in the introduction, Neighborhood Impact is an emerging strategy. It aims to shift power in community definition and decision-making. It's seeking to amplify stories of lived experience as expertise, as Dr. Ruth pointed out, on how we can become students of those who have this lived experience. And Neighborhood Impact is trying to restore community autonomy through reimagined systems. Simply put, we're trying to empower local leaders, neighbors, residents to define what's right and wrong in their communities and then decide on the solutions. I'm excited to introduce today's panelists for this conversation, who are leaders that are defining and deciding on solutions and carrying forward Dr. King's baton of cultivating a beloved community. Through my role at United Way, I've gotten to know and be in partnership with these folks, along with Dr. Ruth. We've met together virtually once a month through design meetings. I've also been blessed with the opportunity to sit down with each of them and share a meal cooked by an advisor to the program, and hear about their lived experiences over coffee and baked goods. These people are amazing leaders, not just because of their roles in influential and impactful organizations, but because of their lived experiences, their stories that have shaped who they are and how they lead. So without further ado, I'd love to introduce you to first Kerwin Pittman. After experiencing over a decade of incarceration himself, Kerwin Pittman now works with formerly incarcerated persons to regain livelihoods and to combat structural racism in the criminal justice system as the executive director of Recidivism Reduction Educational Program Services. Next, we have Maria Mayorka. In her role as Latinx Civic Engagement Coordinator at Blueprint NC, Maria is organizing a Latinx infrastructure to bring equity for this population into the world of philanthropy. And lastly, I'm happy to welcome Byron Laws. In his role at NC Counts Coalition, Byron is creating a venue to engage community members in civic life by providing culturally accessible information and action steps about the very complicated political topics and issues that directly affect the lives of people in his community. So Kerwin, Maria, Byron, I'm so excited to have you with us today. And I will get started with our first question. Byron, our theme for the panel is beloved community here and now. All communities have their challenges and opportunities. So what are you defining as the goods in your community? What's right? What are things that are vital to who you are? What are the assets and amenities that should receive more attention and more investment to strengthen them?
Hi, Angel. Thank you for having me, and thanks for the question. For me, when we start talking about beloved community and what are the goods, the first thing I think about are the people who make up the community, whether that's your neighbor, a mom and pop who may still have a small local owned business. When I think of this question, honestly, one of the first names that comes to mind is Mr. White at White's Barbershop. And that's a place that I've been getting my haircut at since I was in elementary, middle school. Growing up in the Boys and Girls Club down the street, we would get out of school, it's time to get a haircut. Myself and a few other friends would walk up the street and spend our afternoon, honestly, in the barbershop waiting for everybody to get their haircut. And you have those conversations with your barber or other people that come through the barbershop. And now that I'm older, I appreciate it so much hearing Mr. White talk to the different people in the community and still being a successful Black-owned business in Southeast Raleigh that is still providing opportunities to other people. So when you start talking about the goods, I think of the people, and then I think of what are those people doing to impact the community as a whole, but also, kind of give something back and teach others. Mr. White and his family could put anything in their shopping center location, but they continue to support young Black business owners and young Black entrepreneurs. So I think those are definitely the goods in the community. What is right? When I think about what is right, I think about those who may leave the community and come back and still find out where their purpose is now. I think about, my friends who may have left, for college, and some came back and some didn't. But those who have come back, you kind of have to reintroduce yourself to home almost, as crazy as that sounds. But the fact they're willing to come back and they still care about their community and still want to, take the information they learned, while in college and working experience and figure out how can I better impact my community now that I'm back. I always think, that's just ultimately the right thing to do. And if you can't come back to your community, hopefully you can have the same impact in another community in which you feel as though it's your home. You start talking about the amenities and, just the things that made me who I am. Like I mentioned, I grew up in the Boys and Girls Club. So having that resource there on Raleigh Boulevard, having 3 separate locations, I think 8 within the county, that's a great resource for youth in those communities to take advantage of. I wouldn't have went to college if I wasn't a member of the Boys Club, thanks to a scholarship opportunity I had from Noah Licton and her family. And then from there, just the amount of opportunities that I was able to take advantage of, from leadership opportunities, oral competitions, Youth of the Year, all these things prepared me to, be the person I am, but to also have a passion for community and for giving back, and just to, make sure that those that come, after me have all the opportunities. Actually, you want them to have more opportunities. STEM wasn't a big thing when I was, in high school. Now it's everywhere. So what does that look like for the youth coming up now? How do we engage them in that? How do we continue to bring that technology that we were still trying to figure out what was going on when we was in elementary and maybe middle school, things like that. So just, that investment into your community from those within the community, because sometimes people may come into your community and try to tell you what your community needs without discussing it with those who make up that community and make, that community uniquely special. As a native of Raleigh, you tell somebody that, yeah, I'm from here, and they look at you like, oh, like people are actually from Raleigh. I'm like, yeah, like, welcome. We're glad you're here. But, there are people who have been here for generations. There's rich culture here. And there are people who have given back not only to the city, but to national movements moving forward. There's a lot of successful stories and just people of success here from the city, from Southeast Raleigh. And those are goods. And we gotta uplift that. We gotta highlight that, and we gotta recognize that, just not only for us, but for others as well. So yeah.
Thank you for that answer, Byron. I love how you've ranged the goods in community being from barbershops to boys and girls clubs, right? Like you said, I think it can be easy for folks who are not born and raised in those communities to come in and say, actually, this is what needs more investment. This doesn't. But a business like a barbershop that created a safe space for learning, for flourishing, I think would be something that could be overlooked if you're not from that community. So thank you for sharing that. So next question I have is for Maria. What are you defining as some problems and issues of concern in your community? And what specific racial equity problem are you trying to solve for?
Hi, all. Good afternoon. So yes, thank you, Angel. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. Maria here, she, her pronouns. I think that right now I'm going to state the obvious, which is something that I've been thinking about lately, our health issues, right? We all know that right now our workforce and our communities are, going through some tough times because of the current pandemic. And one of the things that I was looking at lately, as I was, talking to community members, helping them with food drives and that sort of thing, is that because the broken infrastructure that our health system has, our community, carries on, health issues for a number of years. My apologies for that. So when this pandemic, the virus happens, it tackles those individuals, with, I don't want to say weak, but, like, in not as optimal condition as the individual who has had access to healthcare all of their lives, right? So one of the concerns right now that I've been looking at is like, healthcare. I feel like if our community would have taken, would have had the resources to take care of their, whenever they get a headache or whenever like a cold, that sort of thing, they would not have faced as a big impact as they are now, right? The same thing with the workforce. I had different individuals that I've been in contact with the past week that unfortunately they're like, yeah, I feel sick, but it's just like a cold. I need to work, right? Because to them, one day of work missed makes up for like a whole month rent, right? Or 3 months rent down the road, because that puts them back. So I think, having a just and equitable system, right, when it comes to health, when it comes to labor and the workforce, are the top number one things that is affecting our community right now. And I believe that those are things that, like Byron's saying, like our communities on the ground are taking care of, right? This is where grassroots leaders, people that are with direct touch in the community, come in handy, right? Because the community has created mutual aid funds. We know we have created this, like, food drives, right? Or food boxes, where, like, we all call each other if a family member or just someone in a community is sick, and we start putting things together and then we deliver them, right? That happened in 2020, since 2020. And I think it gained a momentum, right? Because it's something that has been happening a lot, right? That we call each other up if, like Byron saying, you go to the barber shop and you hear that, like, hey, did you know so-and-so is sick at home? It's like, oh, okay, let's figure out how can we rally up a bunch of us and put stuff together and we deliver. During the pandemic, it just gained a momentum of things that communities of colors underground were already doing. So I mentioned all of this because that is the social issue, the racial equity thing that I'm trying to figure out and try to help, when it comes to communities of color, right? How do we diversify the power that exists within philanthropic circles, so that funding, investments, and, everything that comes in that circle doesn't stay with grass tops and just the same old, organizations that have had access to, the millions of dollars, or just like, a good amount of funding, versus, your grassroots groups on the ground that have to constantly be applying, being told no. And how do we, find them, funding that not only helps them help the community that they've been helping out of their own pocket, but also how do we provide them with, leadership development? How do we provide them, with capacity building resources, right? A lot of our communities are already doing this work. And like I said, have been doing it for a number of years through the popular education model, which when it's the best model, right? Because like Byron's saying, right, it's not an outsider coming and telling me what to do. It's like, hold on a minute, I live here, I lived through this, so this is what worked for me, this is what didn't, and this is what I think should happen. And that's the beauty of empowering and making sure that available resources are available to those folks, are given directly to them, versus someone that got the theory at school, or like just received training, but has never lived through that experience. So that is that is what I'm trying to work on right now, right? How do we diversify the funding? How do we make sure that communities of color, Black and Latinx, who like get together every day, who are directly in touch with that community, who can tell you stories of real life people, are have access to everything that a lot of us do, and especially when it comes to grass stops. And going back to the issues, I think the number one, two things is like that, this labor idea that we need to work on, to make sure that our community has access to paid days off, paid health care, that our kids have like all the health care needs they have, as well as their parents, right? Because we know that kids need healthy parents. They need also mental health, right? Like the parents have access to those mental health resources that sometimes it may not be physical, but it just be mental, right? Yeah, so those are the number two things. And like I said, I think a lot of us have a huge list that we can go on and on, but if we're talking about this immediate need, it will be those two. And later on we can talk about like Byron saying, like I'm a big education advocate, right? Like education is my main field, and when it comes to our youth, right, like Byron says, having those access to resources, to after school programs, right, that have saved so many of our lives, that have offered so many resources, and that without them, I think a lot of us wouldn't be where we are. So thank you, Angel.
Thank you, Maria. I think that's so insightful for you to share from your lived experience on what things that you're seeing as issues. And I appreciate you giving examples of both systemic issues, right, like healthcare, but then also lack of investment in grassroots leaders, right? That's a very it's a different scale than the system. And so I appreciate that, and grateful for your response. So next question I have is for Kerwin. What solutions are you proposing based off of what you see as issues? And how do you think your solution will be successful?
First off, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for having me on this esteemed panel. So solutions that I have is run the gamut from a multitude of solutions, but currently right now, different issues that I'm dealing with and solutions that will be implemented and would be successful. First off is stronger legislation. So stronger legislation, first off, legislation is a tool of check and balance, right? That hold the accountability mechanism in place. And so stronger legislation when it comes to right now, particularly our voting rights are under attack. And so if we could get legislation passed to kind of keep these voting rights, progress them forward to what Dr. King was, one of the things, many things that he was fighting for. Legislation such as Georgia Florida and Policing Act that still haven't went nowhere right now in the General Assembly. Legislation as far as when it comes to giving individuals a second chance at life. I myself, I'm formerly incarcerated, justice involved. I know the direct impact of coming home from the criminal justice system and not having support systems in place to actually help you get a second chance at life and be successful in your transition back into society. And so this is why I started my nonprofit, because I understand this and I get this. So legislation, most importantly, is kind of the things that we should be pushing for. Also, most importantly, change start at home. I'm a firm believer in implementing solutions within self first, and then it reverberate out from self into your community, your family, and then into your community, and then into a larger scope in society. And so we must have this conversation to change the culture of systemic racism, right? Nobody wants to address the elephant in the room. Everybody's quiet when individuals say certain things that they know may be offensive to other population of people. So when you be quiet, you are confirming what they're saying, right? And so I'm a firm believer in silence means acceptance. So if I'm silent about something or injustice that's taking place, that means I accept and I agree with what is taking place, right? And so we must have that courage to speak up and speak out when these injustices take place, right? So this is a solution that you can implement within self to kind of change the culture of systemic racism. And I honestly believe if individuals started having these conversations, we would see a shift in this culture of systemic racism. Another thing, the desensitization of poverty, right? The desensitization of gentrification, of food deprived, of the war on drugs, of police brutality. We see it so often. We have become desensitized as a community when we see a homeless man on the corner asking for change, right? We don't even think about the backstory of how did he got to this point? What's going on? What can I do to make this situation better, not only for this man, but as a whole in my city? I ain't saying you got to change the world, just in your city locally. What can you do? So we become desensitized. We'll just ride right by them and won't think nothing about it and keep going about our day, right? But that's not how we get forward as a culture and as a community. We must not be desensitized to gentrification. It's individuals right now being pushed out of their homes that they've been staying in their homes for years. But yet, because gentrification, they're being pushed out of their homes now for a multitude of different reasons. They're trying to condemn their homes. They're trying to raise the taxes on their homes. They're really criminalizing the poor so they can actually take over these communities. And I'm seeing this take place right before my eyes, and just like in a multitude of other cities across the country. And so we must not be desensitized to what's actually happening, and speak up and address the elephant in the room when it comes to that. Food deprived. Right? It's a lot of communities that are really suffering and not having resources and underfunded to actually feed their kids and their children. And it pains my heart to think about kids going hungry. It honestly do. Right? And this is one of the things that Dr. King fought for, the Poor People Campaign. He fought for individuals who was marginalized, but yet we'll uplift Dr. King on MLK Day, but we won't live out his legacy on every other day. And that's the issue that we're seeing. We're being so desensitized to what's going on around us. The war on drugs. Right now, we know it is two different scales of justice for individuals who are utilizing drugs. You have the Black and brown population, to which the war on drugs is a specific war targeting specifically these peoples. And then you have individuals who are not of the Black and brown population, to where the war on drugs is not even a war on drugs for them. It's a crisis, right? So we must treat this as a public health crisis and stop calling it a war on drugs and making legislation to target these individuals specifically, but help these individuals overcome these addictions, right? Which ultimately trickle down from systemic racism policies, procedures, and different things, and a host run the gamut, right? But most importantly, y'all, what I really want to hit on and what I really want to touch on, we must not be desensitized to police brutality, right? To law enforcement brutality. It's about accountability, y'all. We see it happen so much that we as a culture have become desensitized, right? And it's just like, it's another one. And we keep going about our day. But we must look at the backstory of what's happening when we say it's another one. With that another one, it's a family that's grieving. It's a family that's hurting. It's somebody in their family member, a family member that has been taken out of that nucleus of a family, right? So we must not become desensitized to police brutality, regardless of how much we see it. And we must speak up and speak out, because always remember, silence means acceptance. And if you're silent about the injustices that are going on, then this is the reason why systemic racism is continuing to evolve and process forward in 2022. And we're seeing how the year is taking off now, right? And so we're urging you, and I'm asking you to please get involved. Do not be desensitized. I'm asking you to please have these conversations in your community. I'm asking you to please push and advocate for stronger legislation. But most importantly, I'm asking you to make the change within self. It starts with self. It reverberates to your home, and then out to the larger community as a whole. We know and understand that those, as I love to always say, and Angel can attest to this, those closest to the pain should be closest to the power. And I say that specifically because I went through the criminal justice system, grew up in a marginalized community, and I know the issues that are plaguing my community because I'm still in the community and trying to help other individuals come up out of this systemic racism that is happening in these communities, right? So you could directly see what's going on. So that make me an expert by way of experience. I didn't have to go to no college to become an expert in this, because it happened to me. And so we must center these voices of those in the marginalized communities who've been close to this, who've been close to being disenfranchised, who've been close to being brutalized, who've been close to being living in poverty-stricken areas. We must center their voices. We must take their message. We must understand their concerns, and we must implement it. But most importantly, y'all, if y'all don't remember nothing else that I've said, remember, silence means acceptance. Through your silence, or anybody's silence, who don't speak out against systemic racism and issues that impact systemic racism, they're upholding the underbelly of this cancerous culture. So we must begin to speak out. Thank you.
Thank you, Kerwin, for speaking from your heart and speaking from your experience. I know I'm really sitting with silence equals acceptance, and also this notion of being desensitized and how much we can be desensitized to poverty, to police brutality, to homelessness, systemic racism. It's become normal when in actuality it's so abnormal and so not the beloved community that Dr. King spoke of. And as we go to uplift his legacy, I think that it's important to recognize that the ways that we view things as normal these days is not normal, and it is not a reflection of the beloved community. And so I'm curious to hear from you all on what do you see when you see when you think of a beloved community. I know Dr. King is very much recognized for his "I Have a Dream" speech, and Dr. King's dream and carrying this baton forward. So I'm curious to hear from y'all on what you envision as a beloved community from your perspective. And Byron, I would love to hear from you first.
Sure thing. When you think of beloved community, what do you see? Truthfully, one of the first things that comes to my mind, I think, and I'm right now, as a truthfully, Maria and Kerwin, honestly, like, these are two people that I've, like, even before we started this process, that I was connected to and connected with through actual work. Like, hop on Facebook, something's going down in Raleigh that has to do with, anything dealing with the police. I hop on Facebook, Kerwin's there on the scene, he's live and direct. And I didn't even know Kerwin. I was just followed him because I was invested in what was going on in our community. And I don't even know what the event may have been a few years ago. And you introduce yourself and you build that relationship to people who are just as passionate about what's happening as you are. I don't got to talk to Kerwin every day, but I know if I need something from him, or if I need information about, anything dealing with, police brutality, police relations, certain things when it comes to legislation around, police involvement, I know he's going to answer. He's going to point me in the right direction. He's going to give me the resources I need. Same with Maria. Recently, we was doing some redistricting hearings. I was in a whole nother county, and Maria hit me with a text. Hey, some people here from the organization I work with. If it's possible, can you help them? Any way you can while they're there, just to make them more comfortable, because redistricting is very important. As Kerwin mentioned, if you're silent, that's acceptance. So her having these people show up in a completely different county, in which she may not have been at, and wanted to make sure their voices were uplifted and that I could support them. That's us being vocal about the changes we need in our communities throughout the state. So I know I'm in Raleigh, Kerwin's in Raleigh sometimes, but Kerwin be on the move. So he's wherever he's needed, he's at. I think community too is something that, like, it's a concept you can hold in your heart and mind. So, almost to a sense, like, these people that I've been through something similar with are my community. I've never been incarcerated, but and I'm not speaking for Kerwin, but he has. So he's able to talk to people who've been in that situation, and that's a whole different community. And you take that with you. So you take that need for the changes in your community, you take that with wherever you go, because you know that these systemic racism and systemic oppression that's been taking place, it just looks different wherever you go. So it might look a little different over here, but the people still experience that same pain. They still trying to get the same answers. They still need the same resources. So when I think of beloved community, I think of people who take that passion with them, and they always want to better their community wherever their community is at. So people that look like me, that talk like me, that may have similar interests, those are my community. Those are my people. How do I uplift them wherever I'm at? As well as listen, how do I listen to them when I get there? Because what Raleigh may look like is a lot different than what this other city may look like that may be, facing similar issues. Kerwin mentioned gentrification, and it's happening everywhere, but it looks a lot different in Raleigh than it does somewhere else. And you just start to think about leadership and how that, our city is ran by a city council, and they make certain decisions, and then those decisions go somewhere else. And other communities and cities are ran a little bit differently. So they might be still facing those same problems and having the same negative impacts. But how do you go about forming those solutions? You got to find the people in the community and say, hey, well, this is how we do things here. And, how was your experience, or how were you able to build that solution back home? And what can you bring us here that we can mold and create our own uniquely to our community to get us to the same place, to get us the same upward mobility that we need, to provide those same positive changes in the communities that we need? How do you help us speak up? How do you help me create my voice in my community so that I'm heard and the right people are hearing me? I think of beloved community. I think of everything Kerwin mentioned, from police brutality, war on drugs. We're talking education, food deserts. When we are able to make progress in each of those things, and the progress becomes more important than the profit that is made of those things not being in our communities. Somebody's making a profit of Southeast Raleigh being a food desert right now. So at what point do we get to the place where, we want quality grocery stores within, close proximity of a community, and that's the change that needs to be put in place. Family Dollars and Dollar Generals aren't quality grocery stores, yet you find more of those in Southeast Raleigh than you do in any other community in our city. Food lines the same way. So while it might be a respectable grocery store, we need quality options in Southeast Raleigh, in our neighborhoods as well, whether that's a Harris Teeter, a Trader Joe's, a Aldi, a Lido. There's options. So don't tell us there aren't options to fill this problem. But for some reason, this vacancy is seen more of a profit for somebody or opportunity than it is for people who have kids and families that they're trying to feed every day and give them healthy options, which they don't have. So for me, my beloved community is just to see people like those that are in our cohort, as well as those that might not be in our cohort. I know I got a list of names of people that I could give that are doing great work. I know Kerr Maria has the same well, and we probably got names on our list that are the same. But those are the voices we have to uplift, the voices that we got to support, and just really understanding that one of the things that I kind of always keep in mind is a saying that I got from one of our advisors, Professor Zelter, and she had on the wall in her office, and it's nothing about us without us is for us. So I can't go over here and make decisions for those people, and I ain't never sat in their shoes or walked down those streets or attended those classrooms and schools and talked to those teachers. I can't do that. I gotta first walk in and listen, open myself up to their experiences and their stories, and then if I have something that I could add that's of positive impact, I share it. But beloved communities listen to those in the community that has the answers to better their communities. These communities aren't made up of people who are simple, slow, or stupid, or anything like that. People are very smart without degrees. People have been, are very successful without some of the things that we tend to use as a measurements of success. You got people out here with trades that are just as successful as people with PhDs. So it's just truly about, lining up that passion with the people in the community who want to see the positive change. That's what I see.
Great. Thank you, Byron. Maria, what do you see when you think of a beloved community?
So Yeah, I agree 100% with Byron. So, right, kind of hard to follow after that. But yes, I think that one of the things that when I woke up this morning and I saw all these messages on Facebook honoring Dr. King, I thought the same thing Kerwin did. I was like, this is not about a one day in January. This is about leaving the legacy every single day. Right. And one of the things that us, as someone directly impacted of a lot of the issues that affect systemic racism and white supremacy is that like it really upsets me, right? To see that some people are sharing the legacy, but every other day, they're the ones contributing to the issues that affect our community. So, like I said, but for us to have a beloved community, I ask that like look at what he did, look at the things that are happening around our community. How can we support, right? What can we do to bring our community closer? Because having a beloved community is not about me agreeing and then I love Kerwin's word, desensitizing, right? Like just forgetting about it and not doing anything. No, what can I do, right? Like, is it that I can, like share a tweet? Can I call a friend? Can I donate, non-perishable, like not non-perishable, like actual food, right? Because when it comes to the desert, food deserts, like Byron says, right? A lot of it happens because our community don't have access to actual food, right? So this is just an idea. Like there's a lot we can do to bring our community together, right? Our beloved community looks like us instead of, feeding into propaganda, actually, looking at what is happening and supporting and listening to people on the ground. And I say this because when it comes to police brutality, and I do want to bring that up because of what happened last week, right? Where you have Black and brown groups united for one common cause in Raleigh. That's amazing. That's an example of what is happening in the state, right? Like, of what we need to see in the country, right? That we need to all come together, ignore biases, ignore the racism, and say, what, enough is enough. It is time for us to come together regardless. And if we have a common goal, we have common issues, right? Our brown and Black communities are getting killed, right? There's a lot we can do to come together and say, what, we have the power, we have the numbers to change legislation, right? To change the outlook in our community, right? That's what I see when I think of beloved community, right? How do we gather all our differences and make them one unique, similarity? Because as much as we have differences, we also have a lot of the similarities that unite us. And that's what we need to make this happen. So there's a lot we can do. There's a lot that like that we need to like look inward and see, what am I doing, what am I contributing, so that the kids that I'm raising, or the kids that are being raised next to me, who are going to be the future leaders, and future not in 10 years, I'm talking in the next 5, right? Like what legacy am I going to leave to them so that they can continue, right? So that we don't continue to perpetuate the cycles, right? So that we can change history. So that's what I can think of, right? Like let's all figure out, what is it? What are we doing for this country, for society? What can we do, to erase all of the bad examples, all of the bad stuff that our ancestors have left, right? And honor that good, right? Like, so let's not just honor and live by Dr. King's words today, but let's live them every single day, and let's inspire others to do the same thing. So thank you.
Thank you, Maria. I appreciate your answer. And Kerwin, lastly, what do you see when you envision a beloved community?
So what do I see when I envision a beloved community? I automatically think of the etymology of the word, and I understand the power of words, and words do matter, right? And so it just makes me think of the breakdown of the word, be loved. So love is the highest principle of understanding, and this is one of the main things that Dr. King preached and advocated for. This, in my understanding, and from what I gathered from him, was his foundation was love. And so to be loved community, when you break down the word community, is common unity. What do we have in common? What do we all have in common? We're humans, the humanity, right? So it's the love for humanity, beloved community. If you just have a love for humanity, all of these issues will subside, right? And you will have a community that will thrive. But when you don't have love for community because you don't understand the common unity that you all have, everybody's human beings, then guess what? We have the issues that's plaguing our communities today, right? And so when I see a beloved community, I see a community that's thriving. I see a community that's healthy. I see a community that's successful. I see a community that love, and love is the utmost pillar that they stand on. Because if you love something, you're gonna do anything you can to make sure it's good. So when I think of beloved community, I think of the etymology of the word.
That's so powerful. Thank you, Kerwin, and Maria and Byron for your answers. And we have one last question that's coming from the audience. What are immediate steps that we as community members can take to support your work specifically? And I'll start with you, Maria.
My work is rooted in listening to the people, directly impacted individuals. I think we have to erase the notion that like someone else is gonna come save us, and the notion that everything is in the books and the theories and everything that we have studied. But no, the answer lies within us, right? Within the community. The community has power, has knowledge, right? And we need to listen, right, to directly impacted individuals, right? I know that when I need to know how can I support formerly incarcerated folks, I need to look at Kerwin, not because of his nonprofit, but because he has lived through it, right? The same thing with, like if I wanted to know about, like in this case, the food desert in Raleigh, right? Like Byron, and if it's not Byron, I know Byron's gonna put me to the right person. I think that look around ourselves, right, in our community, in our networks. If we're passionate about something or we wanna help in something, let's go and listen to the people on the ground, to the people that again are directly impacted, not to the big nonprofits with the fancy names or the organizations and so on. Like, because at the end of the day, a lot of that it contributes to the number. I think we're all here because we believe that community impact is the real impact, right? Neighborhoods, people living this day in and day out. So what can you do to support the work? Listen to these communities, right? Like get in touch with them. How can you support them? And then get connected with individuals that, are supporting those direct individuals and not the big name nonprofits at times. Or organizations, right? Because sometimes it goes beyond the scope of that nonprofit industrial complex.
Thank you. Byron.
Can you help to support your work? I mean, I think right now Maria made a great point just about listening, but also I think something that anybody could do support, the work that we're doing. The work that we're doing is like we're really trying to dismantle institutions. Like that ain't easy. But the thing about it is you first got to understand how that institution was created. So if it's something that you're passionate about and you want to like figure out how you can support what we're doing, go and see like who we're talking to. Go see the people that we're addressing when it comes to police brutality, when it comes to redistricting and voting rights, when it comes to what's happening in just health and health equity. Like if you could find a meeting in your community and you see those people who are in power. And I'm not saying that all people, this is definitely not about those that are in power. It's about you figuring out how the system works. How is this institution ran and operated? And how do I become a part of the change agent to improve that system or to, dismantle it all together and create something new? I think that's really what anybody can do right now to support our work is just not even just figure out, but just make yourself a learning vessel. Because everybody doesn't have the same lived experience. So somebody might care about the work that Kerwin is doing, but can't come at it and be supportive from, I've been through that. So from that standpoint, I open myself up to listening as well as what time and sweat equity can I put in to help support the work that may be new to me, but I understand the impact that it'll have. I think that's the best way you can support just the work that we're doing, as well as, this work is levels and levels and levels. These are just the things we're passionate about. You also got this whole array of issues that have, have been, problems and have negative impact for generations. But you just find out what you're passionate about and just start showing up. Because that's what I did. I just started showing up. I just started listening. And from there, I took, what I brought to the table and made myself an asset to the change I wanted to see.
Great. Thank you for that word. And Kerwin, how can we take steps to support you?
How you could take steps to support me is actually spread the message. It's a lot of individuals who are able to get in certain rooms that other individuals are not able to get into. So once you are in those rooms, please spread the message that we're spreading and the things we're fighting for. As well as a great man once said that a poor revolutionary only leads a poor revolution, right? And I ain't saying that you got to invest financially, but what I am saying is you need to invest with time or volunteering or something in that nature, right? Because what we're seeing is those who are really on the front lines fighting are really underfunded and not more so in money sometimes, right? We're underfunded in volunteers. We're underfunded in having the time to do this because we're doing so much of other things. So always remember that to carry the message into every room you go into, because that room you're in may not be the room we can even get our message into, right? But also remember that a poor revolutionary can only lead a poor revolution. So volunteer with your time, and volunteer financially, and things of that nature.
Great. Thank you for your answers. And I want to conclude this panel. I am so grateful for you, Kerwin, for you, Maria, for you, Byron, for being honest and open and vulnerable with us on this panel, sharing your lived experiences, telling us about from your experience what you see as problems, and then what your amazing solutions and ideas are. I'm grateful to have been a part of this with you all, and I look forward to participating with the rest of the community in ways that we can support your work, and especially your work as it is flourishing and cultivating a beloved community for our area. So now I will pass the mic to Eric Gookian, who is our CEO and president of United Way. Thank you all.
Thanks, Angel. I'm Eric Gookian, and I'm the CEO and president of United Way of the Greater Triangle, where our mission is to eradicate poverty and increase social mobility through the power of partnerships. Eradicate poverty and increase social mobility through the power of partnerships. As Maria, I want to thank all of our panelists, Maria, Kerwin, Byron, learned a lot and listened. But as Maria was saying, United Way is a big nonprofit with a fancy name. And what are we doing in our work to eradicate poverty, to end poverty? How are we an anti-poverty organization? Well, I would say that through our neighborhood impact work, we're committed to not only listening, we're committed to love, we're committed to being heart-centered, but we're also committed to listening to those closest to the pain. And we believe that they should be closest to the power. And we're going to use our platform to support that. And we are going to fund it. We're going to fund it multi-year, multi-million. That is what our neighborhood impact is going to be about. But it's going to be about more than money. It's going to be about listening to the folks that you heard from today. For too long, we've been making decisions by giving folks like Kerwin and Maria and Byron a voice, maybe. But what I would posit is we need to give those folks a vote as to where the money goes and to where the power goes. And folks like me, and by that I mean white folks, we need to step out of the way a little bit. So we're committed to doing that at United Way of the Greater Triangle. I want to again thank our panelists. I want to thank Dr. Ruth. I want to thank Angel. I want to thank Nick. I want to thank our whole United Way team. I want to thank the committee. Our work is just getting started, and it's these folks that are going to lead us, and we are going to follow. Thank you for the honor of this panel and for wrapping up this panel. And have a great Martin Luther King Day, and every other day after it. We need to be doing this work. We cannot be an anti-poverty organization if we are not going to be an anti-racist organization. And we need to say it, and it's not political to say that. This country has to change. This community has to change, and it will change if we listen to the folks that are closest to the pain, and they should be closest to the power. Thank you, and have a great afternoon.